prison stories always end the same way. A few hundred years of slumber, and people grow complacent. AKA the crew of the Grand Cipher, managed to stumble upon my inert form and, foolishly mistaking me for a primal beast or something, lifted the seal. Immediately, I wanted to eradicate them. No one could find out I had regained my freedom. I would not suffer entombment again, even if it meant I needed to transmogrify a few Skyfarers. But then, I laid eyes upon Lyria and her blue hair, and there it was, an entity that I could not identify. I, who had unveiled the very laws of reality, could not classify her existence. She was surely from a different plane. My interest was piqued, and for that, I spared the crew. What can I say? Curiosity killed the alchemist. With no particular agenda for my newfound liberty, I offered my services to these Skyfarers. They would give me unfettered access to the girl, and I would give them unrestricted access to my findings. And as a bonus, I might save their asses a few times along the way. Of course, the captain readily accepted. Though I admit, there was something about the gleam in the captain's eye that caught my attention. What was so special, you ask?
That's for Cagliostro to know, and for you to find out.
On a typical humdrum day, I was browsing Sierra Carte's wares for a few chemical essentials. Impressive how the world had become a network of convenience. What were previously rare and unobtainable items were now collecting dust on a tradewoman's shelves. My eyes traced the rows of flasks and potions before they settled on a vial clutched by the man standing next to me. Oh, toxin. An excellent choice. Save for the fact that his confused and brooding expression revealed he didn't quite understand what he was holding. Who was this moron? Well, now that I was aware of the potential hazard, I couldn't leave well enough alone. Traveling with the crew had certainly rubbed off on me.
Excuse me, mister? That looks scary. What you gonna do with it?
He looked stunned. An appropriate reaction, given my stunning countenance.
What? This? It's pigment. Needed for painting supplies.
Oh, I didn't take you for a painter, mister.
Pigments were frequently composed of toxic earth metals. Perhaps I worried over nothing.
It's not for me. My little sister's the artistic one.
Huh? His entire mood shifted, tense shoulders relaxing and lips curving into a soft grin. It was nothing like a few seconds ago, when he seemed to be studying the pigment like his life depended on it. Perhaps he was a few rupees short. No, mental calculus doesn't translate to confusion. His look was more concerned. No. I'd seen that exact expression before.
So what color picture will she paint? Cagliostro sure wants to see the final product. Aw, pretty please.
This is coming out of nowhere.
What the hell? Did I not give him the world's cutest plea? How dare he refuse me? He will suffer for...
But I guess it's okay. I actually have some free time now, if you're eager.
There. That was more like it. Lyria, the captain, and I followed the man to his studio, listening to him jabber about his life along the way. His name was Heimel, and he had been living alone with his sister, Shanae, ever since their parents died when they were younger. Their life was simple, he explained, but a simple life was a luxury for some.
Wait till you see! Schnee's paintings are breathtaking, and I'm not just saying that. The world needs her talent.
He was alight with passion. A stupid smile plastered across his face. True pride in his sister's craft. As for me, art was too abstract. How would one tame the subjective, bring order to chaos? There was too much I couldn't comprehend. But was it not aesthetics that led me to understand and codify the deep mysteries of cuteness? Yes. Perhaps there was something I could learn from a craft as humble as painting. And thus, with the future of alchemy on my dainty shoulders, I pushed open the door to the studio. We entered to find Shanae violently tossing in bed. Heimel rushed over, grabbing a phial of healing tincture from her bedside. Hand supporting her shaking head, he poured the concoction into her mouth. Immediately, her convulsions lessened, but her breathing was still labored. It became clear why he was so antsy back at Sierra's store. Toxic pigments could be dangerous in even the most steady of hands, and, well, I glanced down at Shanae's finger for a cursory examination. Normally, I don't afford peons the luxury of my intellectual evaluation, but I was feeling generous. These symptoms are grave.
Do you know what's the matter?
Lyria's voice quivered with worry. I do. I've seen this exact disease once upon a time. Heimel's eyes shot to me, propelled more by hope than surprise.
Truly? The local doctors have been useless. They just give her pain relievers and leave. Can you do something?
As much as I wanted to refuse, in that moment, Heimel's desperation reminded me too much of my own sister. I'm not a medical professional. Sure, I know a formula that might ease her symptoms, but it's not a permanent solution. Not to mention the biggest pain in the ass, tracking down all the components.
Please, you're all we've got.
Ugh, begging. Now, the deal was sealed. And it had nothing to do with Lyria, Vern, and Captain Goody Two-Shoes staring holes into the back of my head. Fine. The world's cutest genius alchemist Cagliostro is on the case. Consider yourself lucky. We left the studio and hurried back to the airship. In this skydome, I could think of only one environment that would produce the necessary reagents. Mount Nagelith. Perfect. The component should be somewhere around here. We need reagents attuned to water. Let's sweep the area.
Roger that! Eyes are wide open! Inspection time! You're a mean water spirit! Why don't you play nice? Disruption!
Seems our sweep wasn't thorough enough. We better check any spots. This one's suspiciously large. Let's smash it and see what it's
All we
like.
have to do is collect this stuff, right?
Yep. But we'll need more than that.
And away! Are those spirits protecting it? Either way, looks like we'll have to go through them. Nothing to see this way.
We have enough mineral components. Next up, we'll need crystallized cyber.
Saiga? Those flapping eyeball creatures? I think I saw some further up ahead. Sorry, Cagliostro's in a hurry.
It's raining swords! Take the blade!
Bingo! Pardon our intrusion.
Janae's counting on us. Let's do it! Oh no! Poor eye monsters!
Oh, yes! Bring your tears to us!
Too much for you?
Cagliostro wins again! So, did we get the tears?
Of course we did. I even had time to distill them.
Cagliostro, over and out!
We'll repay you someday.
The moment the potion reached Shanae's stomach, wariness melted from her frame. That medicine will only temporarily stop your symptoms. They'll be back if you don't treat the root of the problem.
Still, peace is priceless, no matter how brief.
Shanae was not the only one feeling more relaxed. With tensions eased, I decided it was time to explain Shanae's condition, Lycerian fever syndrome. It was an autoimmune disorder of the nervous system, caused by irregularities in the body's ley line structure. Common side effects included reduced function of the lower extremities and unrelenting fevers. Development occurred in the embryonic stage, a defense against the mother's own ley line system, interpreting the fetus as a foreign object. Of course, the prescribed painkillers and fever reducers had not been effective. They could not treat what was essentially a natural function of Shanae's body.
But the formula you made for us, it suppressed her symptoms, didn't it?
Sure, but suppression isn't treatment. And for a long period of time. I'm just sorry I couldn't make you a true cure.
Please don't apologize. I feel like I've reclaimed a part of my life thanks to you.
Brave little thing. She had done nothing to earn her lot in life, but suffering claimed her all the same. Though the world was built upon fundamental truths, at times, I felt as if I understood nothing about it.
Come to view the requests?
It was a bright day when Vern, Lyria, the captain, and I went back to the studio. Shanae was staring out the window with a dazed smile. So the formula was still working. Good.
Crazy how you invited yourself to the studio to see my sister's paintings. And now you're her personal pharmacist. Serendipity's funny like that.
If you feel like repaying me, how about you finally cough up some art and show me around?
That's a fair price. Everything in the studio was painted by Schnee. Feel free to get close. Admire the details.
Previously, I had managed only a distracted glance at the studio's walls. But this time, I saw visual creativity exploding off them. I wasn't an expert on art, but even I felt the vibrant energy bounding from her drawings. Powerful, powerful pieces swirled around me like a hurricane. And one painting in particular, it was resonant. Sketches were littered about the floor, too. And even they were filled with vitality. How could such a feeble body muster such vivid work?
Oh yeah, about that pigment I bought when we met. Want to see it in action?
Taking the vial from a shelf, Heimel poured the pigment into a dish and mixed it with oil. A few swirls later, and the color had transformed in a way that was more chemistry than alchemy. Intriguing. Takes a specialty product to make that hue. Heimel smiled and handed the freshly prepared paint to Schnee, who was already mid-painting. A bead of sweat trailed down her brow as she swabbed the tint across her canvas.
I believe in Schnee's talent. Look at her. She's amazing. I just have to get the world to recognize it.
It's nice having a supportive sibling. I meant it.
I never know how to read your tone. But, well, her condition made me realize how precious our time together is.
Heimel, who clearly had never known abundance, smiled like the richest of merchants. Though Schnee had been left with a raw deal, it was clear her life wasn't without meaning. If only I could go back and tell my own sister. You were my courage when I was weak. You were my light when I was in darkness. I have lived through eons, but you were my rock. I hoped these siblings, at least, would understand what they meant to one another. I even prayed a little. Which was dumb, considering this Skydom still thinks primal beasts are gods. Guess I'm getting sentimental in my old age. Lyria and Vern became a regular fixture at the studio. They said they wanted to be there when Schnee finished her latest piece. I felt much the same. Her pieces were charming, even while portraying the thin line between life and death. Rare to get drama like that outside of a novel. But my true reason for visiting was out of concern, not interest. She was battling an unpredictable disorder, so I wanted to be around should the worst come to pass.
Could you stick around for a few? I need to run out and buy a few things.
You dare waste my time with your foolish errands? Fine, but at least be quick about it. After Heimel left, Schnee waved me closer to her bed.
After all you've done, I don't want to sound ungrateful, but...
Her voice quivered. She was plainly troubled.
I don't know if I can say this. Wow. Okay, I want my brother to be free. I don't want to bind him any longer.
Tears began to gloss her eyes.
Without me holding him back, he could find someone and settle down. He has such a kind heart. He needs to share it. If I'm ruining his life, then I would rather not be in it at all. Please take...
I interrupted her. I don't condone this, and I doubt your brother would either. Oh boy. If there was ever a time to talk about my past, this was it. Look, I've been in your shoes. There was nothing the village doctors could do, and I was abandoned by damn near all the townsfolk. For the dying, hope was cheap. It was better to look inevitability in the face and maintain some of your dignity. But there was one person who stood beside me. My light. My rock. My sister. She was with me the entire time, keeping me warm in the shadow of death. And in turn, I gave her the comfort of company, not being alone in this world. I continued to detail memories of my sister, over 2,000 years old, hoping that Shanae would get the point. She hung on to every word. When I concluded my story, to my disappointment, Shanae seemed to pick up the wrong message.
How did you get better?
Simple. The curse of genius. I developed an entire school of magic and abandoned my wretched body. I couldn't suppress a proud grin. She nodded along, not quite understanding. I couldn't blame her. Few people had the opportunity to learn the glory of alchemy, especially in these far-flung skydoms. Imagine your body is a jar and your soul is water. I created a fresher, cuter jar and poured my soul into it.
You can do that sort of thing?
Shanae cupped her mouth in surprise. Don't insult me. There's nothing I can't do. She grew silent as gears began to whir in her head. A few moments later, she stared at me with pleading eyes and spoke.
Could you do it for me?
Well, that was predictable. But I could relate to her predicament, and that alone made me want to help. If you really want to go through with this, I can make you a jug too. However, you should know. It wasn't going to be simple. The soul swap was messy on an experienced alchemist's psyche, much less a mundane girl's. Nor would I be around to perform maintenance down the line. It could very well be a fast track to the grave. And to inhabit an alchemized body was to stray from the natural order. She would forever be a false life form. Shanae had no knowledge of the arcane. She was struggling to grasp these factors. And what's worse, I didn't have the decades needed to explain the details. So I opted for a simpler route, and explained the side effects in more mortal terms. Even if your memories, knowledge, and personality make the jump, you will never feel the same. Your senses will feel foreign. Your fine motor skills will be dulled. In short, goodbye, art. Take, for example, the sky. We each paint it in our own way. One may clumsily blob some white on a blue background, while others might choose a deeper hue or express the clouds with more definite contours. Art is a negotiation between the artist's mind, eye, and hand. And if 2/3 of that equation were to change, then the artist might as well be a different person altogether. Even I, genius that I am, took centuries to adapt to this process. Finally, it means you won't be human. You'll have to maintain your body like a machine, and you'll never have children. Is any of this sinking in?
But
Shanae looked down at her hands, as if it were the first time she had ever seen them. It was never an easy decision. Even my sister begged me not to abandon my mortality, right until I made the hop into a new vessel.
I've got you covered.
The silence was deafening. Shanae was considering her past, and what abandoning it would mean for her future. I observed her until I grew impatient. There's no reason you have to make up your mind now. As long as you found an answer before we sail out of this skydom, I can help you either way. Capiche? I turned to leave, causing the bedridden girl to lunge after me.
wait! don't care about losing my art. If it will free Heimel to live his life, then my choice is clear.
Her tears were pierced. She bore the pain of losing her creative soul and the joy of gaining a liberated brother. Even with my infinite understanding of the universe, I could not say which of those emotions was stronger. You sure you don't want to talk to him first? She shook her head. I felt a small pang of regret. I led her down this path because I, on some level, felt we were alike in our suffering. But the truth was, I had an, I won't say easier way out. The same solution applied to Shanae's problem would be far more complicated. If anything, I felt like I understood Heimel's position more. He would simply want what was best for his sister. What was best for me. After leaving the studio, I made a list of all the materials the procedure would require. It was going to be a pain in the homunculus to gather everything, so I enlisted the crew to help. I had my sights set on the Pillar of Vayoi. Due to the high concentration of arcane energy, the materials found there made for powerful alchemical reagents.
Wait till you see! Shanae's paintings are breathtaking, and I'm not just saying that. The world needs her talent.
Curse that proud face of yours, Heimel. Look what you've made me do.
Cagliostro, on the move! Cagliostro's coming for your cores, Mr. and Mrs. Spirit People!
And while I'm at it, I might pick up a few alchemical reagents in the process.
Let's go!
Great. This won't help anyone.
Look at all those spirits! What do you call a group of them anyway? A herd? A flock?
I call them targets. Check. That's one component off the list. Now, we should double back and make sure we didn't miss anything along the way.
Yay! This'll do the trick!
Useless trash.
Ugh. Cagliostro knows everybody wants to cuddle up to her. You're icky! That's man!
There might still be something we can use. Head back to check, just in case.
Ribbon tied. Spells ready. Components gathered. Hooray!
That's it for all of our elemental components. Now, if only we can track down an effigy.
Hi!
Now, alchemic dust.
I think I'm starting to feel sorry for the spirit. It's the last one! Get him!
Excellent. Throw a few spirit guts in the old extractor, and we'll have prime crystals on our hands.
What now? Don't worry about it, Mr. Lizard. Wanna head back to town? Tell me, who's the best?
When we returned to the studio, Heimel was a flustered whirlwind.
Schnee told me everything. Please, we refuse to let you change her body.
We were shocked to hear his refusal. Well, Vernon Lee from her mouth. She's the one suffering after all. What right do you have to speak for her? He grimaced.
Schnee has dreamed of being a successful artist ever since she was small. Even after the fever started, she's put her entire soul into her art. And finally...
In his fervent voice, you could hear how long he'd been supporting his sister, praying for her success. And now, after years of hard work, she'd made it. She had recently been invited to participate in an exclusive exhibit, a privilege apparently afforded to very few.
Finally, Schnee will be recognized for her talent. If we throw away her chance now, what will that mean for her future? Or her legacy?
I wasn't sure whether he was gritting his teeth or his fists tighter.
Schnee's been waiting so long for this! Why add this darkness to her life now?
Because you deserve to live your life too, Heimel.
Brother and sister stood opposed, on opposite sides of their future.
I've never thought of you as a burden. I supported you because I love you. It's a blessing to watch you create.
No one doubted his words. More than anything, he wanted Shanae's efforts to bloom into something beautiful. He wanted her future years to remain bright. If her dreams were so close to coming true, he reasoned, then why abandon everything now? He had a point. But he'd never been in Shanae's position before. I had. And I knew what needed to happen this time.
Come to view the requests?
Shanae's attitude changed after hearing her brother's plea.
Cagliostro, forgive me. I was selfish, looking for a quick fix. But now, I know I should face this disease and live my life the way I meant to.
Figures. You needed time to process your options. Actually, that was the reason why I asked Heimel about his objections in front of Shanae. She needed to hear his part.
We're sorry for wasting your time. We know it wasn't easy to gather all those components for a new body.
New body? Doesn't ring a bell.
But you said you would give Schnee a new vessel.
Right into my trap. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a bottle of pills and a note, handing them to Shanae. I present to you my genius medicine for slowing the progress of Lycerian fever syndrome. I calculate it's 3 times more effective than the previous tonic. Not hard to manufacture either. I'll give you the recipe. Stop by Sierra's sometime, and she'll help you fill it within 2 to 3 business days.
Wait, Cagliostro? So why did we go all the way to the Pillar of Vayoi?
It wasn't obvious? I needed some stronger base reagents to help synthesize the first batch. My crewmates looked at me with irritation. But when you've lived as long as I have, sometimes you need to spice things up with a few pranks. While we're on the topic, I did a little more research. Experts say that ley lines rebalance themselves after a number of years. Problem is, most people die before it can happen. But with my new prescription, you should be able to make it long enough. No sweat.
Cagliostro, how can we ever repay you? You are everything to this family.
Shanae was so overcome with emotion, she couldn't express her own thanks. I didn't mind her silence, though. Excess sentimentality always spoiled the mood. We had more important topics to discuss anyway. Right, so about payment. The founder of Alchemy developed a new medication specifically for your family. That's gonna cost ya. Heimel swallowed, readying himself for the worst.
I'm a fool. You're absolutely right. We don't have much in the way of money or valuables, but we'll do whatever it takes to...
I think there's been a misunderstanding. You don't get to decide my reward. Are we clear? Shanae and Heimel both nodded in fearful silence. Seeing harmony restored to the studio was a wonderful feeling. I even allowed myself to bask in memories of my sister as a treat. Sometime later, I was visiting Ciero's shop in Folca. You have my payment from Shanae and Heimel?
Sure do. It's a big one, so take good care of her.
From behind the counter, Ciero pulled out a canvas displaying the world's cutest girl. Clear skin, dewy eyes, and a mischievous smile, all framed by soft golden locks. Utter perfection.
Not that I have to explain it to you. Lots of folks have said they'd like to buy this pretty picture. We had to fight off all the amateur art collectors.
Of course. Who wouldn't want a portrait of me? Though I was the only one worthy of owning such a masterpiece.
I was surprised to hear you knew Lady Shanae. Must be a fancy lady, being a master and all.
Wait, master?
Indeedy. Youngest artist declared a master in a good long while. She's really made a name for herself in the market. Here, just got this piece in today.
I had seen it before. It filled me with a resonant vitality, just as it had in that cozy little studio. But now it was accompanied by a price tag of a whopping 5 million rupees. I think I'll add this one to my collection. In all my years of filling vessels with spirits, I had never procured an object with as much soul as Shanae's painting. I had to have it.
Are you sure? That's my biggest budget breaker.
I laughed. A few million rupees for a miracle? Chump change. Unbeknownst to Ciero Carte, I got away with the steal.
Once upon a time, in a land far away, there was a lone swordsman famed for his two-sword style. He became a legend after fighting over 10,000 battles, and the mere sound of his name struck fear into the hearts of his enemies. Whenever he appeared in town, ne'er-do-wells were said to scramble away like spiders fleeing the light. Prospective fighters began to seek out the swordsman, and thus he gained quite the following of disciples. Amongst them, some were so strong they could crush warships with a single strike. One could do worse when choosing students of the martial arts. So the master abandoned the battlefield for the mountains, where he could train his beloved disciples in peace. There was one disciple who quickly stood leagues above the rest. It took her only a matter of days to master the most complicated techniques. She grew at an astonishing rate into one of the most powerful fighters the master had ever seen. But more impressive than her wits or her aptitude was the strength of her conviction. Every day, the top disciple begged for harder training, and the master was willing to reward her passion with the very depths of his knowledge. And that's why... Why? Oh, skies help me. That's why when the master found out his top disciple had betrayed him, he was filled with anguish. She went rogue, forcing some of the other disciples to do her bidding. Eventually, the master caught up with her, and they fought a deadly battle. When the dust settled, the top disciple's sword arm hung limp and unusable. It was a bittersweet victory, as the master knew what must come next. He readied his blade, preparing to release her to the afterlife. But he couldn't force himself to make the cut. Not after all he had poured into this girl. Not after failing her so. Thus, he laid down his weapon and promised to live his remaining days in penance and regret. Oh, how our good intentions cloud even the most prescient vision. Having thrown away his name, his blade, and his path, he set out back into the world. But this time, swearing no one would suffer from his tutelage again. Time passed, and the swordsman found himself atop a different mountain, where he learned he had a knack for fishing. Suited him just fine. Bass for breakfast, salmon for supper, and naps in between. Yep, it suited him just fine. It was the quiet, healing life of a hermit. Sometimes, when he needed supplies, he would go down to the village and train the locals in a little sword work. That made his coin purse jingle again. But this peace wasn't to last for the swordsman. He discovered his top disciple was back to her wicked ways, and, sword in hand, he vowed to conclude her. This was his true purpose for traveling with the crew. Though the young captain never suspected the little Harvan fisherman was harboring such a dark secret. The former disciple's latest victim had been a simple man from a remote mountain area, cut down, somehow without the use of her sword. A real shame that. One more innocent life lost before its time. The swordsman asked the crew to make haste to the village. When he saw the murdered man's corpse, such was the carnage that he could barely keep from averting his eyes. It was his weakness, his cowardice, that cost this poor man's life. But this time, instead of wallowing in pity, he would don his white uniform of old and atone. He called it his burial garb, and it represented his fearlessness on the battlefield. If he were dressed to meet death face to face, what more could his foes do to intimidate him? Of course, his crewmates tried to reason with him, concerned he might throw his life away to make up for the wrongdoing of another. But the Swordmaster was determined. He had vowed to stop his former disciple, whatever risk that entailed. So, when finally the moment of reckoning had come, the Master gripped his blade, ready to strike down his favored pupil. Before he could do the deed, however, his resolve crumbled. His emotions were too strong, dulling his senses and causing him to lose the match. The Master's former youngest disciple, with his two newest pupils watching from the sidelines, rushed to aid him. Ironically, it was the youngest disciple who struck down the fiend in place of the Master. The swordsman was lost in grief, but his newfound champion told him this was for the best. After all, Such an old life deserved the rest of its days to be spent in peace. After joining up with the crew, I've had some helter-skelter days, let me tell you. So when we arrived in Zega Grande, I knew I needed to get myself some fishing done. Reset the old noggin. Found a nice, quiet pond and dropped my line. Bless me taters. Must have been hours past with no bite. Finally, I decided to pull up my rod and check if the bait was still hardy. But there weren't no baits, no hook, and no fish. Only a lonely little bobber remained on the line. Right, well, what about me traps? I was halfway through the search when I realized, blast, I left them in the lodge. What a day, what a day. But it was too late in the noon to go back for them, and I had other business to attend to, like getting back to the pond and staring out at the clear water. In that moment of stillness, the fishies swam out of their hiding spots. There were big ones and little ones, and the whole school of them reminded me of my teaching days. Each of my disciples was unique in their own right. Had me some slow learners and some fast ones, some goody two-shoes and some real punks. I learned me some good lessons from those kids. My top student, Grace, never wavered in her particular sense of justice, and her commitment to her training was ironclad. What a waste. Rains, my youngest pupil, lost his way for decades after leaving my tutelage, but he ended up killing Grace in my stead. He was selfless, thinking only of his master. They say the master extracts potential from the student, but I fear I've ruined more young lives than I've helped. Makes a fisherman wonder how they all would have turned out had he just kept well enough to himself. I turned Grace into a monster. Not a day goes by I don't regret honing her skills. Unfortunately, she had the gift and the gumption to go far, and I exhausted all my knowledge on her. If only I had focused more on the why of my teachings rather than the what. Huh? I swore I felt a nibble at my rod, but when I pulled it up, there was nothing to be found. That's when I remembered I still hadn't hooked or baited the line. That was odd. I was getting antsy. Maybe it was because I forgot the traps, but I couldn't relax just sitting there anymore. I decided to pack up and head back into town. You see, the mind is like a creek. You want to keep it healthy. You gotta keep the waters from stagnating. But churn them too much, and you risk losing all your fish. I decided to head to Sierra's shack and replace some fishing gear, hopefully restoring my brain pond in the process. But just as I was dipping my toes into the placid waters of the lures and bait, I heard a rustle from behind. And to my surprise, they were my crewmates, picking up a package. Said they were bored at the inn and asked if they could come fishing with me. Youngsters so bored they wanted to go fishing? First time for everything, huh? While I was hammering out the finer points of fly casting with the captain, Sierra Carte piped up. Said she'd come across a pretty tasty rumor.
Yep, apparently there's a legendary fisherman in this skydom that people have started calling the Fisher God.
I'd heard rumors like this one before, and they always stank like fish guts. Catching 10 fish with one cast, netting a whole consortium of crabs. By yourself? Gah! If I had a fin for every story like this, I'd be a pretty scary sea monster by now. Then again, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't intrigued. There's a scale of truth to every story, so there must be a reason they call this person the Fisher God. Guess you might say my interest was piqued. Because if this fellow were half as good as me, he'd make a mighty fine rival. And maybe that's just what I needed. this so-called fisher god. The captain, Lyria, and Vern wanted to help out too. I asked around town where I might find such a rival, but he proved to be as mythical as his title suggested. Rumor had it that he appeared at ponds, peaks, and valleys. The others garnered about the same information, which only further piqued my interest. No matter who we asked, we could not catch the proverbial tail of the fisher god. All we learned was that he was skilled, able to catch 10 fish with one cast, yada yada, and any new species he caught would be named after him, meaning there were lots of little demigods swimming around now. With only tales of his escapades to feed us, and no concrete info, we grew weary. You can't sustain a healthy rivalry on rumor, after all. We needed to change our approach and re-examine the facts. All of the stories were about places he visited, meaning he'd never been spotted in town. With that in mind, we enlisted Sierra Carte to speed up the investigation. Sure enough, after a few days' time, she gave us a map dotted like it had the chickenpox. There were stamps on ponds and lakes, glaciers and volcanoes, and even a poisonous swamp. All of them locations where he'd been spotted. So, the old fart got around, did he? Good to know he had an adventurous streak. After staring at the map for a while, I realized there was one place conspicuously without a stamp. It was the most dangerous island of all, known for the molten lava covering its surface. Going off my hunch, Sierra Carte did a little more digging around, and we learned a man with a fishing rod chartered a ship there a few days ago. The chase was on. Keep up if y'all can. Now, where's this fisher god?
Ah! We're monsters!
That's no good. Did we wake the spirits of this land?
What fisher god?
Hey.
Are you really gonna fish in a dangerous place like this?
Of course! We're not dealing with your average angler here. This is a fisher god raptor. Now, he should have left some flies or tracks or something. Keep right for
Okay, but we better be careful while we search. Ah! Don't scare me like that!
Now, if I were a fisher god, this is probably the bait I'd use. Just a hunch, though. Careful now! Those spirits look angry!
Those are the ones that explode if you eat them too hard.
Rotura!
We've come pretty far. This heat is killing.
Just a matter of time before we're there. Now hop to it. Huh? Looks like somebody came through here, and they were collecting magma worms.
Whoa! I see somebody. Maybe it's the fisher god.
Very well could be. Give him a hello and see what's up.
Hey there. Can we talk a minute? Hey, mister. What the heck are you doing out here?
What's it look like? I'm fishing.
What fish? You might catch a few rocks if anything at all.
We fish, therefore they are. It's the deepest waters what hide the greatest prizes.
The proverb left his lips like a right prophet. This had to be our fisher god.
I still don't get how fish could survive in lava.
And that's your problem.
His answer was cryptic, but it had its own logic. The captain, Lyria, and Vern cocked their heads to the side in confusion. Clear water or molten rock. Cast the rod and catch the fish.
Truer words were never spoken, friend.
Guess I've learned me something over the years. Those unblinking eyes, that unrelenting hunger for the catch. His tools were top-notch. More importantly, however, he had the aura of a man born to hunt the seas. But I didn't come to admire him. May we presume you are the fisher god?
And to what do I owe the accusation?
What do you say to a little fish-off betwixt the two of us?
Ah, now there's a song to my ears. It would be my honor.
And thus, the net was cast.
Hello there.
We fish, therefore they are. It was a profound statement. Hang your line thinking you won't catch anything, and you won't notice even the heftiest bite. Determination was the most essential tool in the old tackle box. But then again, we were sat up next to a lava lake, and I would need more than simple chutzpah to pull a fish out of there. Luckily, I had me secret weapons.
Someone came prepared.
Beautiful, ain't they? I strung a special hook, carved from a flame worm's tooth, to a special line, spun from its mane. Been looking forward to the day I can bust out these bad boys.
Whoa! You're really going to do this?
The captain, Vern, and Lyria were stunned as I cast my rod into the lava.
Just what the heck are you old-timers expecting to catch?
Vern's voice was filled with confusion, but wasn't a moment longer when we made a believer out of him. Oh, a bite!
Me too!
The fisher god and I started pulling up catch after catch. It seemed like we both brought determination to spare. But the fish living inside the lava weren't no slouches neither. They were covered in armor like scales, and when we pulled them ashore, their flopping sent liquid death flying in every direction. Was kind of funny. So there we were, equally matched, neither side willing to back down. As our piles of molten fish gradually turned to hills, the captain, Lyria, and Vern were dumbstruck. Soon enough, our swordbacks told us it was time for a gentleman's break, and we decided to tally our scores. We counted each fish as we threw them back into the lava. Their physiology meant they couldn't be cooked. Don't want no sulfur in my sushi anyway. But they sprang back alive as soon as they were returned to their familiar warmth.
Should've known you'd be a shark on the rod.
Just trying to keep up. It was a rare thing to meet your match. The smiles on our faces were proof of that. Vern flew up to us.
Do all old dudes fish like that? If you went for broke, I wonder who would come out on top.
The fisher god and I locked eyes. We could feel the sparks flying.
Sounds like the gauntlet's been thrown.
Agreed. We've had enough of a warm-up.
Then you won't mind if we up the ante, huh?
He told us about a few local legendary fish that had eluded capture for years. Reminded me of the noble bonito from good old Fanta Grande. We agreed the winner would be the first to trap one of them fabled guppies. The prospect sent lightning through me body. The old spark was coming back. Now I just had to track me down a living, swimming myth. Couldn't be that many lakes harboring legends, right? Turns out there were few eyewitness accounts of such fish. Guess they didn't like flashing their scales as much as the fisher god. but I knew they had to exist. Why would he make up the challenge? So back to Sierra we went. She kindly asked the Fishermen's Guild and scholars to lend their assistance. They told us of a potential target. A beautiful fish, said to have the loveliest iridescent scales in the world. But it had never been caught, so it had yet to receive a proper name within academia. As if to tempt me more, we learned the locals called it the jewel fin. Catching it would be like grabbing a cloud, but the more I heard, the more I needed it. Surely it was a fool's errand. Too bad I was beside myself with determination. A being that existed somewhere between reality and rumor, I had to catch me some of that. Thus, in the coming days, whenever I found a semi-reliable lead, I would fly to the spot and cast my line. Went to salt lakes where a sip of the water would dry you to the bone. Wandered around underground streams where you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. And then every place in between. The captain, Lyria, and Fern accompanied me on my flights of fancy, but they grew tired of the pace. I wouldn't force them. I had planned to make the trip alone anyhow. All I wanted to do was find the unfindable, to catch the uncatchable. It was a good sign, honestly. They say anticipation exists right before accomplishment. Take a new sword technique. You only perfect it the day before a duel. A consequence of pre-battle nerves sending your noggin into overdrive. And this fish-off was a duel to the death for me and the Fisher God. It would be the accomplishment of the century for any who lived by the rod. I was having the time of my life. But I knew I didn't have forever. We were in this skydom for a reason, and that mission had to take precedence. I decided my next search would be the last. It brought me to a labyrinthine jungle, which had claimed many adventurers in the past. I heard that somewhere inside was a spring turned monster den. One look at its bewitching twinkle would be enough to drive a man mad, and he'd throw himself into the pool to be swallowed. Relying on those exaggerated claims for guidance, I braved the forested depths to discover not a glorious spring, but a regular old bog. Ugh. Ain't no legendary fish ever lived in a place like that. But still, I cast my rod, and Vern and the captain waited with bated breath as they watched me bobber-a-bobbin'. The swamp remained quiet. I was neither overcome with anticipation nor bored from inaction. I was part of the stillness, and my rod was my nature and leap and liver fish a bite. I tugged the fish to the surface and began to tear up as the most perfect, lustrous twinkle broke the murky waters. Turns out none of the scholars' descriptions were quite right. But this was it. This was the jewel fin of legend. How's this for a catch? I proudly displayed the jewel fin before the Fisher God. Its scales glistened in iridescent waves, unreal in their beauty. Its fins ethereal and transparent, waved as if kissed by a breeze. That old coot was flabbergasted.
Slap my behind! Where in the seven skies did you find this?
That was a delicious reaction. But of course, the Fisher God was a fisherman of taste, and he had a rebuttal prepared. It was a large fish, obsidian in color, whose scales seemed to drink the light like a void. Its dorsal was strong and stiff, as if to mark it as a sea king.
Whoa! 2 legendary fish? Isn't that nuts?
Both of our catches fit the criteria of the competition. It was gonna be too hard to call. Guess we couldn't complain, though. Not every day we got to see such rare specimens. Still, something had to be done, so we turned to Lyria, Vern, and the captain.
I think both are amazing. I've never seen such pretty fish. Can't we just say you're both incredible and be done with it?
Guess two legendary fish don't make a champion. Especially when we were both set on wearing the crown. Nope, it didn't sit right with me. Our rivalry pushed the craft of fishing forward, hadn't it? There was fire in our guts, and we deserved to name a proper victor.
What are you waiting for?
Ooh, hope I turned off the stove.
Vern saw the determination plain on our faces.
You guys aren't gonna let this go, are you? Game's back on then.
Lyria pondered for a moment and made a suggestion.
How about whoever fishes up the most happiness? That could be interesting.
A genius suggestion. This island was under Avia's control, terrifying the population. It would be a saintly move to give them cheer with a side of full bellies. It was settled. We would go with Lyria's suggestion. He who could bring the most happiness to the island would take it. After a nod to one another, the Fisher God and I set out to do some real fishing. So, who's ready to shove off? Hope we come across a good fishing spot.
With this blizzard, how are you gonna even see your rod?
Ancient technique. Hey!
Nice moves.
I can hear running water. You think this here hole has a river at the bottom? Hey! We're just looking to fish. What if you want to be a sushi platter? Step right up!
This should do the trick.
Can fish even live in weather this cold?
The colder the weather, the fatter the fish. Makes some good barbecue.
Ooh, that's neat. It's gonna be cool every day.
Ooh, that spot looks swell. This place is perfect. Let's get started.
Holy crap! Looks like the monsters caught our scent.
Curse their timing. I'll clean them up right quick. They'll never smell like
That takes care of that.
I wouldn't be so sure. Looks like we got a big bet on our hands next.
For real? We don't have time for this.
Yep. Hey, why is bad attitude? I don't think it's gonna let us leave without a fight. Now, this here's the Cypher Sunrise. Sorry, Bub, but you're between us and our fish. That was a good. Got my chest and arm all warmed up. Oh, I hope we didn't scare off the fish. Ha! Wait a minute. It's over? Results day had arrived. Residents of Seed Hollow were gathering, waiting to see what bounty we could share.
Feast your eyes! I have caught the elusive brave scale.
The Fisher God took to the podium. The largest fish in this skydom strung up behind him. The crowd was wowed by the sheer scale of the thing, and I was no exception. Should have known he'd come out with rod blazing. But I, on the other fin, took a different approach. Behold! All these humble shellmen who make their home in these very rivers. I sure wasn't gonna win through size, but maybe superior numbers would do the trick. Next, the Fisher God and I began to fillet our catches, sharing sushi, soup, and ceviche of all sorts with the crowd.
The Brave Beam is delicious, and how do you beat that impact?
The shellman is just as good. It's so fresh, and it's been served at the optimal temperature. Absolutely perfect.
Everywhere we looked, there were people enjoying our efforts. Even the crew were getting their fill while they could. But since it was a competition, next up was evaluations. Members of the crowd were to vote on whose catch made them feel better, both in flavor and in general happiness. One after the other, the votes piled up for the Fisher God. It was starting to look hopeless. But there was a special reason I chose to serve the shellman. I wasn't panicking just yet.
Shall we call it there, friend?
I gotta hand it to you, Fisher God. You served some delicious fish. But let's see how it plays out. While I was talking, a cute little scamp, snot running down his nose and everything, cast a vote for me.
You didn't want to vote for the big fish, sweetie?
It was too big and scary. I like the small fishies.
The Fisher God's breath caught for a moment, and I knew he understood my plan.
Hello there.
The Fisher God bowed his head and admitted I was the winner. But before I could humbly accept his withdrawal, Vern voiced honest confusion.
Looking at the votes, you're the clear winner, aren't you?
Not at all. Without this master of the rod opposite me, these results wouldn't have been possible.
He spoke from the heart. Moved me a bit to hear that he understood me through and through.
It's ordinary fish, ones we consume daily, that bring us health and happiness. Delicacies shine because they're a rare treat, but well-being is built on something more than rarity. Hearing that youngster speak, I understood what Yodarha was trying to tell me. In fact, I couldn't surmise for myself as proof of my hubris.
He continued.
I guess what I'm trying to say is, a child's smile will do more for a village's well-being than all the legendary fish in the sea. That's what I should have been aiming for.
A smirk sat on his lips as he turned to me.
Congratulations, Yodarha. Even had I won this competition, I concede in our fish-off. You are the rightful victor. I've learned much from our duel. I thank you from the depths of my heart.
Never in my days had I met a more worthy gentleman. And you, good sir, helped this old minnow rediscover his love of the sport. After the voting had concluded, the townsfolk were still savoring our dishes. Both Brave Bream and Shalman were a hit. The satisfied smiles of the people were evidence of this. But as all good things must come to an end, so too did the feast. Despite the mountain of fish we started with, not a single fillet was left. I turned to the Fisher God, a gleam in my eye. And though he just admitted defeat, his eye held the same twinkle. You want a race to see who can get this place spick and span quicker? We were no longer rivals. We were brothers of the rod. And this little competition would tide us over till our next real match. We were shopping at Sierro's when the merchant herself popped up from behind the counter. Apparently, she'd been waiting on us, ready to share the latest seaworthy gossip.
A certain rumor swam earlier this month. You see, people are saying there are 2 Fisher Gods working this skydom. Would you know anything about that?
Vern and Lyria gasped in surprise before turning to give me a curious look.
Could it be?
You know, I never meant to keep making a name for myself, but old habits die hard, don't they? Sounds like quite the handsome fella. Can't wait to meet him.
All right, see you.
Thank you. Till next time.